again, it's all relative, guys. It's all situationally conditioned. It's all conditioned by the opponents, and these are different things that you guys should definitely keep in mind as we move forward here with the actual calculations. And what we set up is a very concrete example of how all this comes together. Right? So when calculating your expected value, it's not just the equity that you see in PokerStove, as I hope I've successfully argued here. It is especially, the percentage that your opponents will then let go of that open raising range when you are in 4-bet and 5-bet scenarios. And what I've set up is something, especially for good to be the king, which again is such a good comment. It's actually perfect to conclude our big stack strategy discussion and coaching here for our purposes. And we'll look at a couple different scenarios, and I think with the background from the slides that I just showed you guys, this should all be quite clear. So what do we got here? Pot including the bets, right, when we're on to act. So it's 2150. The assumption here is that we're playing NL 100, so that makes every single big blind exactly $1. Very clear and simple for our calculations here. Small blind post is 0.5, big blind post is $1, right, or one big blind. We open raise 2-4 big blinds with ace of diamonds, king of hearts, as we just had multiple times. Our opponent 3-bets us 4 times our open raise size. So we 2-bet, he 3-bets 4 times our bet. So we bet 4 big blinds, he re-raises to 16. Total pot at that point is 2150. And here is the big point, guys. When you're holding ace-king and you are big stacked, you've only contributed 4 big blinds, so your effective or your remaining stack is $96. You don't have to go 4-betting here. Quite honestly, it's it's not exactly what good to be the king there was asking, but you can also just flat. I mean, you can just call that 3-bet and play fit or fold on the flop, because you know when you're holding ace king offsuit, or ace king suited for that matter, that it's highly unlikely that your opponent's on a pair of aces or a pair of kings. And to be quite specific, it's when you hold an ace king, it's 203 to 1 against that your opponent is on a pair of aces or a pair of kings. So if you flop top pair top kicker holding ace king, right, you're good. I mean, given a 3-bet 4-bet pot versus a tight, not always, but again, please don't quote me out of context, but versus a relatively tight 3-better, probably on now at this point queens or jacks, maybe 10s, right? That's how that looks. I have been myself in multiple pots where I'm on ace king, and believe it or not, the ace of the king flopped, right? Which is going to only happen, by the way, guys, about 1 time in 3 flops. So you're going to whiff hard with that ace king about 66% of the time. Keep that in mind. But yeah, that ace and that king flopped, and then sure enough, the opponent flipped over. Top set of kings or aces, and I'm holding the ace king myself, right? It's just mathematically off the chain, so it does happen, but it's very, very rare that is the case. The other thing you need to be careful of is that when this guy is in 3-betting wider, like we just had in PokerStove, right? If he's 3-betting with this range, and you just flat, then all of these small pairs are also on the list, right? All these suited connectors are also on the list. So that means when you flop that ace or that king, and you're playing a lag, basically a guy who's 3-betting a lot wider, he may have set up, right? He may have flopped his set. He may have flopped open and a straight draw and a flush draw. He may have flopped a nut flush draw with a pair, right? All of these different high equity flops that I showed you guys in the previous videos. So again, take this into consideration, right? You don't have to 4-bet here, okay? Although the wider the guy is 3-betting, the better is it that you actually 4-bet to go ahead and take it down. The tighter he's 3-betting, the more I'm inclined to flat, actually, and not 4-bet when holding ace king offsuit, especially, and then play it probably for pot control. You can get into real trouble real quick with this ace king hand. That's why it's so difficult actually to play, especially out of position. But yeah, we'll look at this scenario in a couple different ways. So you don't have to 4-bet. You can also just flat 3-bet. Why not? You are getting, if you just flat, just under 2-to-1 odds. So in order to hit that flop and break even, you need about 36% equity. And with the rake based at 5% and $3 maximum, which is pretty standard at most websites, most online casinos, then yeah, you're looking at pretty much 38% that you need to hit that flop. And again, you've only got 33%. So you've got to make up the difference, right, with post-flop play. And again, also calling this, right, this 12, when you're holding small and mid pockets. So when you're calling for set value here, guys, in this scenario, when he raises relatively big here at 4x, or 4 times your 2-bet, your call is $12, right? And you need 8 times that, more or less 7.5 to 1 against is the odds against you flopping a set when you're holding a pocket pair. Now, you've already got $21 here in the middle, and at 96 with the dead money, you're good to go. All right, but that's going to be right at break even. I mean, you're probably going to be making some versus tight 3-betters. You'll probably make up the difference, but you really got to be able to. You really got to assume that your opponent will play for stacks when you do flop your set, right? And that's also barring maybe 3-suited flops, stuff like that are also very dangerous. So yeah, when you're flatting here and when you're flatting the 3-bet with a pocket pair, you've got enough for the implied odds, but you got to be pretty damn sure that your opponent will stack off when you do hit for this to even be a positive EV flat versus that 3-bet. So it's a bit of a side note concerning set mining, but it's also important. But okay, back to the story. We hold ace of diamonds, king of hearts. We open raise to 4. He 3-bets us to 16, so 4 times our open raise. Our call is 12. Right? We need 36% equity if we're going all in for that 12, or we need 36% probability of hitting a playable flop. All right. This calculator, this is for basically calculating just that one call. The pot when we do call is going to be 33.50 and less the rate right at 32. All right. In this case, of course, we don't just have to call, but we can also re-raise, right? We can 4-bet here. If we 4-bet, it's with good to be the king's comment. The question is, if we 4-bet shove here for a full 96, what's the scenario? Well, if we assume our opponent never folds, right? We have 0 fold equity. What this calculator shows you, which I absolutely love, is the following. We shove for 96 and a heads-up pot, right, over the top as a 4-bet. The villain's call break-even percentage is right at 42%. So that means your villain, when you shove for 96 and you assume he's never going to fold, he only needs just over 42% to break even in the long run. Now, keep that in mind, right? That's quite it's callable in a lot of spots, especially versus loosey-goosey and calling stations. Yeah, you shove over the top, you assume no fold equity. You're going to need, with the rake, 48%, just over 48% to break even in the long run. And with ace-king, yeah, the question is, do you have it or don't you? That's a calculation for so-called no-fold poker, where you have 0 fold equity. You shove over the top, you're going to need 48% to break even in the long run. And what does that actually equate to in your opponent's total ranges? You've got ace-king offsuit, and you assume your opponent is 3-betting, let's assume he's 3-betting here at 5%, 9's a better ace-queen, and calling that entire range. You are plus minus 0 EV right here versus that entire range. A lot of guys aren't going to be calling with 9's or ace-queen, right? They're going to be calling more over here and probably more over here. All right, decreasing your equity, but increasing the fold equity that you're going to have, the probability that your opponent will fold. So again, this calculator above is showing you your equity breakdown, assuming 0% fold equity. It's really good for pot odds calculations, really good to know what your opponent is getting when you do shove over the top for an all-in break-even percentage that he'll need or she'll need to make that call. And it's also very good to know Also including the rake, right? You can define that differently, maybe 10%. Some live casinos, they have absurd rakes of over $10, well over sometimes. Right, and that does change the equity that you need to break even. The BE is always a break-even percentage when one villain, one opponent is calling. And now we want to look at the expected value calculator below, which does take into consideration fold equity, which is going to be more representative of actual play in real time online, or also you can use these calculators, of course, for your analysis of the hands that you've played offline when you're maybe discussing with your friends or just checking it out yourself. Very useful tool, and I'll explain it again here in case you guys didn't see the initial videos. What we've got is the pot, and this is the total pot at the time we are considering either making this call here or shoving over the top. Okay, the assumption is that you're pushing all in. You're not making normal raise, you're shoving. Right, you're going all in, so-called shove, so-called push, so-called jam, whatever. It means you push everything you have across the line, you go all in. The pot at the point of your decision is 2150. It's defaulted here as above. The effective stack, the H again is always a hero, U, and that's 100. So it's 96 plus the $4 that we made for the 2-bet, and the effective stack at the beginning of the round there is $100. All right, our bet, or if we post a blind, you could make that 1, whatever. But actually, we're outside the blinds, and we raise it up with our ace-king offsuit to 4 big blinds, which is $4 in this case. And the dead money, less the rake, I've already adjusted here, as you guys see. The small blind and the big blind post, plus our bet. All right, guys, and remember, when you are making a bet and somebody re-raises you, the money that you've contributed to that pot is no longer yours. And you shouldn't see it like that. You should actually see it as if somebody else had bet it. All right, so part of the dead money is our open raise, actually. And we subtract then the $3 rake here, which is T2, and we come up with 250. So at this point, we've made a 2-bet to 4 big blinds, and when you subtract the rake, there's only 250 for us to pick up there as dead money. Good. Hero, if we assume again from the PowerPoint that he is raising 3%, he's re-raising it 3%, jacks or better ace-king, our equity with ace-king offsuit versus that entire range is just at 40%. If we assume he never folds, so he 3-bets, jacks or better ace-king, and he calls 100% of his 3-betting range, we're going to lose 17 big blinds every single time we push with the ace-king offsuit versus this assumed range and the assumption that he never folds after a 3-bet. Not a happy situation. So this is, again, a very large 3-bet size, relatively seen. Some guys will 3x that to 12. We'll look at different scenarios here in a second. But that's how the situation looks when you think he's 3-betting at 3% and never folding. You're going to lose 17 big blinds approaching infinity with the ace-king offsuit versus that range in this scenario. And again, guys, for the equity, you can either swing over here to our table and see, okay, ace-king offsuit is at 40, right at 40%. If you think he's calling this, you got 40, stuff like that. Or of course, this table is again very, very useful for real-time play. I've got an extended version for big stack play, which is over here, as you guys see. And that includes much wider ranges because when you're not playing short stack, you'll be playing a lot wider ranges. All right, so you can either look at these tables or you can go to, again, Poker Stove, enter your 3%. They defaulted to 9's or better ace-king. We think that's more like this. So we make our 3% range defined as jacks or better ace-king. Plug that in. And here you go again, 39.8% more or less equity. And again, this equity is, of course, to the river when you're shoving pre-flop versus that range. Okay, let's look at the situation now again where this time we do assume that he's going to fold some of this range. So he 3-bets us at 3%, right? And we assume that he's going to call versus our 4-bet shove with only queens or better, and that means paired queens, kings, or aces. That being the case, the equity when he does call is not 38 or 39, 40%, rather 30.8%. And the fold equity, I've just copied that there from the PowerPoint, is 50, let's call it 55.56, including the card removal. Now, again, you gotta really know your opponents, right? If he's not folding jacks or ace king, then you need to add, you need to make your equity here at 39% with no fold equity. But if we assume here that our equity is 30.8, more or less 31% versus this range here, and we assume that he's gonna fold that much, we're still losing, guys. We're still losing 3.5 big blinds every time we make that shove. Still not good. So again, the tighter your opponent is 3-betting, the less likely or the less inclined you should be to 4-bet shove. And again, this is a really big 4-bet shove, right? I mean, he's at 16, and you're basically way overbetting that pot, right? You're more or less 4 or 5 times in the pot for your shove. So that's an abnormally large bet size. And if you do, again, referring to that comment there at YouTube, if you are 4-bet shoving with ace king, you need to be 4-bet shoving with your kings, your pairs of aces, kings, and queens as well, so that they don't know that you're only shoving with a more marginal hand, right? A lot of guys aren't going to 4-bet shove with aces or kings here because they want to get paid off, right? And they would just make a normal raise size to maybe 30, 40 bucks, right? So whenever you're making these moves, guys, just make sure that you're doing it in the right spots versus the right opponents, and you're changing it up a bit. All right, so it keeps you unreadable. Very, very good. That's the situation that we looked at in the PowerPoint. The other one that we looked at was right here. And again, 3-better at 8.4%, right? If he 3-bets us here at 8.4%, given this range, our equity with the ace-king offsuit, when we come over the top, is 55%. And if we assume that he 3-bets and calls that entire range, so 0 fold equity, his 3-bet percentage and his 4-bet call percentage are exactly the same. Okay, rarely the case, but whatever, especially when you're pushing this big. For example purposes, when he does call down with that range, right? He raises the 3-bet at 8.4%, calls everything, right? So he never folds. We're going to be making 13 big blinds in the long run. Now that's looking much better. Let's say, for example, he raises this amount and he's also folding, right? Which he will be. Let's say he calls us down with 10s or better ace queen. Our equity versus 10s or better or ace queen with ace king offsuit is already 49.2%. Even with the fold equity, right? He's only calling us down with 10s or better ace queen. We're still making 10.5 big blinds for that shove. So again, you guys are starting to see the point that I'm hitting at here. The tighter the 3-bet range, the tighter the 4-bet range, the less likely, or 4-bet call range, the less likely you need to be to come over the top. The wider the 3-bet range, the more likely you need to be with ace-king offsuit or ace-king suited to go ahead and 4-bet it. That's the principle. All right. Again, please don't quote me out of context. It's very, very game specific, very opponent specific, table specific. It has to do with history notes and all that kind of stuff too. But yeah, that's the long and the short of it. Let's look at a couple more just to make this very clear to you guys. We then look at our HUD stats and we see that this guy is 3-betting at 39.8%, right? So, forgive me, 3-betting at 3%, giving us again the 39.8% equity when he never folds. Now, negative 17 big blinds. We assume that he's not going to call queens this time. So he's letting a lot go. With the card removal, that's almost 78%. Without the card removal, we're holding ace-king offsuit again. It's only 70%. So that's a big difference. Anyway, so let's say he calls us down only with kings or aces when we shove over the top. And we're going to have 18.5% equity there. However, he's folding a lot. And with the card removal, 77.78%, that's actually a positive EV move. A lot of assumptions here, guys. But yeah, he's open raising with the 3%, jacks or better ace king, only calling our 4-bet with kings, pair of kings or pair of aces. And we know that that's highly unlikely when we hold the ace king. So, anyways, he's folding almost 78% of his 3-bet range. And even with that tight situation with ace king, we're in the green. Let us change this up a bit. Let's change the parameters. Alright, let's say we don't we don't open raise to 4 big blinds, but 3. It's possible. And this guy doesn't 3-bet us 4x, but 3x. So he raises it 3 times our open raise size of 3. Now the amount to call here is only 6. Right? We posted 3, he raises it to 9. And again, question is, now our effective stack is of course 97. And here we can make that call just for hitting the ace or the king pre-flop. As you guys know, we're going to be hitting right at 33% of the time. And we'll be looking good. So you can also flat here. You don't have to 4-bet that. Alright. When you do 4-bet, okay, here's the pot. Right? Effective stack is here. Our blinds are now, our bet is $3. Alright. And we're contemplating the shove over the top. So what's the dead money? Not 4, but 3. So only a blind and a half. Versus his entire calling range, forgive me, that's going to be 49.2%. When he calls us down with 10s or better, ace queen. And yeah, given the fold equity with the card removal at 48.2, we're looking at 7 big blinds. The question you gotta ask yourself is it worth a 4-bet shove given this pot size, right? It's a higher variance play. If you get called down with a lot of pairs, you're behind. Again, with 0 fold equity, you need right at 49% to make that shove. So, yeah, it's it's a tough one. Now, with a lot of players today, they're open raising 3x, 3x to 4x, and 3-bets are more or less 3 times the open raise. So it's quite standard these days. Let's say we go 4. Open raise to 4. Another principle, guys, the tighter your ranges are, in general, your starting hand ranges, the bigger you should be betting as an open bet. Also as raises, stuff like that. The more laggy you're playing, the more loose, aggressive you're playing, the smaller you want to make your open raise sizes, in general. Alright, so let's say we're playing a tighter range here. We raise up the ace-king offsuit again to 4x, 4 big blinds. The guy behind us then re-raises us. He 3-bets us 3 times our raise size. Pot is 1750, and our call is the difference here. All right, so our call will then be 8. Now, what happens here? Well, not a lot of difference. You guys see how this is working out. 96. Very good. I mean, the equity is more or less the same. All right, and yeah, the shove. Let's see here. This is now 4. Again, 4. And yeah, it's a similar scenario, very similar scenario. So again, equity versus the calling range here. 10s or better, ace queen is just under 50%. We assume that he's opening with this and folding the rest. We're still at 9 big blinds. So yeah, that's how you look. Long explanation to a relatively short request and question. The wider he's 3-betting, the more he's folding, the more apt you should be to 4-bet shove with your ace-king offsuit. That's how that looks. And finally, let's look at a scenario with where we're facing the 4-bet, which going to be the king had also requested. So we essentially 3-bet, the opponent 4-bets. He doesn't shove all in, but he 4-bets, makes a normal 4-bet size. And we're both effectively big stacked, and then the question is, should we then 5-bet all in? And I think this is quite interesting. This is also gonna, you're not gonna be making these enormous overbets, especially when the open raise size is only 3 big blinds and the 3-bet size is in 3x. So again, guys, remember the golden rule of betting that I've covered at my site and in various videos. Anytime you make a bet, raise, or call that's going to commit more than half your stack, in general, you're not asking yourself, should I make that call? By and large, you're asking yourself, should I push all in or fold? So, 5-bet scenario, here we go. NO 100, small blinds 0.5, big blind is $1 exactly. The opponent raises it up, tighter opponent raises it up to 4x. You 3-bet, basically 3-timing his open raise. So you raise it, you 3-bet it to 12. The villain, your opponent who open raised, who 2-bet, now makes a 4-bet of let's say 3 times your bet. So he raises it to 36 total. Alright, so he raises it a total of 32 to 36. Hope that's clear. Our effective stack size is then 88, and the amount to call is actually not the full 32 because we've done the 12. Rather, let's call it 36 minus the 12, 24. And yeah, that looks much better. Alright, you always, guys, if you're entering the amount to call here and using my calculators, just make sure you come over here and look at the pot with an all-in and 1 villain calling you. Right? It should be exactly the effective stack size plus the blinds, which it is here, and minus the rake at the second line. Very good. So our amount to call is 24. Alright, so he 4-bets us. Right? Pot at the point of our move is right at 50 big blinds. And our call is 24. So again, when we make that call, we're not committing half of our stack, so we could theoretically make a 4-bet call here with our ace-king offsuit. And this is kind of continuing our story. Right? You have all these different options at your disposal. You don't have to 5-bet shove here. You don't have to do it. You got the ace-king, you got 4-bet, and yeah, it's advanced play. 5-bet seems sometimes when you're super deep stacked, 6-bet, stuff like that, but you can flat this. Look, you flat the 24 on the 50, and you need more or less 30, 33, 34% with a rake to break even in the long run, i.e. in this case, since we're not going all in, to hit a playable flop. You got the ace of diamonds, king of hearts, and ace X offsuit hand, ace king offsuit hand. You're gonna hit either that ace or that king right at 1 time and 3. Right? So you're more or less good. You can play that to reduce variance. You hit the ace of the king, you shove, you miss, you let it go. That's gonna be a wash in the long run, probably a slight loser, given the rake. And it may even be a slight loser when you're playing other savvy players who are also raising with ace-x hands, and then they push you off on the flop. So all these things you should definitely take into consideration. But yeah, making this call as a 4-bet call is right on the line of doable with your ace-x, with your ace-king offsuit. All right, let us answer the final question there of Good to Be the King from YouTube, and look at this 5-bet scenario. So recap: small bet. A small blind, big blind. Opponent raises it up to 4 big blinds. You 3-bet it to 12. He comes over the top, 32 more. Your call is 24 if you're just going to call it flat, the 4-bet. Or you can 5-bet all in. And that's our scenario right here. So how should we update the expected value calculator for all-in shoves? So pot, exactly the same, effective stack. And again, guys, this is at the beginning of the round. So the way that you input this. This is, another way to see this is basically the pot, when you make your shove, is the amount of money, the amount of big blinds that you will receive when your opponent folds. That's a way to look at that. So if we 5-bet and he folds, we're going to take down 49.5 big blinds right now. The effective stack, your effective stack in this case at 100 big blinds, is essentially what you can get from your opponent in addition to any dead money that's out there. Basically any money that doesn't belong to your opponent's stack. Alright, so yeah, we 3-bet it to 12, so that's our bet. And the dead money at this point is going to be the blinds, our 3-bet, less the $3 for the rake. Right, so 10.50. If we're 5-betting and assuming he calls everything in his range, approaching infinity, we're going to be plus minus negative 9 big blinds, right, as an expected value for that 5-bet shove when he never folds. 4-betting 10s are better, and we're at 49% versus the entire range. 10s are better, ace queen never folds, we're still good. Although it's, 9.5, that's big actually, EV wise. 9.5, over 9.5 big blinds. And yeah, again, the wider he 4-bets in this case, and the more he folds, the higher this number, the higher our expected value goes. The tighter he is, or she is, let's say he's only raising it up, queens are better. Let's say we see a 4-bet, and this is very often the case, guys, especially at the low and middle stakes. We see a 4-bet percentage of only 1.5, right? REV is all of a sudden just 30.8, yet again. He, of course, rarely folds the queens there, right? And there you go. 20, yeah, negative 27 big blinds is an expected value for that shove versus such a tight 4-better. Now, if we think he would actually 4-bet queens are better and then actually fold the queens for 1/3 of that range, then that's still only here, right? And we're still losing money even when he drops the queens. If he drops the queens and the kings, again, without card removal here, let's just assume 66, and then we're getting back in the positive. But that means somebody's got to be able to 4-bet with queens, kings, or aces, and then fold the queens or the kings when you shove, and he's only got to call, and break even at, he only needs 32% equity, say, to break even in the long run. So that's just rarely going to be the case. And while we're at it here, doing a little poker math in 3-bet, 4-bet, and 5-bet scenarios, I did promise that we would look at just a 3-bet shove, so let's do that briefly. Small blind, big blind. He raises it up to 4, and we come over the top. So our call would be 4 here, 96, right? So if we go ahead and shove for 100 big blinds over the top with our ace-king offsuit, that's just an enormous overbet, and that's, I can't really advise that in most scenarios. With the rake, you're going to need to be over 50% in most situations, and I mean, if he calls you down with 10s or better, ace queen, that's you're just right at that. So a normal 3-bet I would advise before going ahead and 3-bet shoving when you are big stacked, just to point that out. Down here, I've created a steal and re-steal set of calculators, actually. This is the fold to a steal in the big blind, expressed as a percentage, fold to the steal in the small blind, and you on the button stealed in $3 in our NO100 example, so you raise it up to 3. It's folded around to you. You're holding your ace-king offsuit, ace of diamonds, king of hearts here, to be very specific, and with these fold to steal ratios of your opponents in the small and the big blind, you can steal raise up to 3 and then fold when they come over the top all day long, and you'll still be just better than, and you'll be making money. That's how that looks. The way I've set this up is then for the situation where either the villain in the small blind or the villain in the big blind re-raise. So they re-steal, and in this case, small blind folds, the big blind re-raises to 9. Your effective stack is 96. It's defaulted, and your call, if you're going to call that flat, is in 32.43%. Alright, if we want to plug that in up here, it's the same situation. We make it 3. He comes over the top to a total of 9. And there you go. It's exactly the same, right? When using the pot odds calculator, break-even equity you need is then to make that call all in 32.43%, same percentage here, with the rake 34.14, exactly the same. So yeah, you guys can play with that a bit. The effective stack is then 96, and this is again the case of 4-bet shoving all in, right? So if you 4-bet with the 96 remaining, this steal re-steal calculator kind of works that out for you. That's kind of automated to what you enter above, and yeah, you're gonna need, if the villain in the big blind calls, you need 48.36%. Look at that, and 49.1% with the rake. You make a steal raise to 3. You're holding ace-king offsuit. Player in the small blind re-steals. He makes a 3-bet to 9 big blinds. The player in the big blind position then flats that 3-bet, and you come over the top for a 4-bet shove for your remaining 96. The player in the small blind needs 43, pretty much 43.5% equity, 44 with the rake, to make that call all in and break even in the long run. So yeah, then you would plug in essentially this 4-better's range, and you would see how you work out with your holding. The player in the big blind, of course, needs exactly the same percentages because they both invested the same amount. This underneath is when your hero, when you shove all in, the break-even percentage that you need when they both call is going to be just under 33%, and that makes good sense. And yeah, these are a couple of the tools that I've set up for you guys, and yeah, please feel free to work with this a bit, check it out, and drop me a line if any of it's unclear, if you need some additional input on that. So underneath, yeah, this has been up the entire time. This is basically just a generic number of outs that you might have post-flop, and the probability of hitting either on the turn, the river, or when you shove all in on the flop, hitting on either the turn or the river. Respective probability or completion probability, and the odds against that happening. So that was everything that I wanted to cover concerning fold equity and expected value calculations. I know it was a bit math intensive, but I think it is absolutely necessary for any player who's looking to really get to the next level and become an expert in the shortest amount of time. Again, the long and the short of it is, when you're 4-bet shoving or 5-bet shoving, you can do so when you're holding ace-king offsuit, in a very concrete example, much more profitably when your opponent, your villain, is 3-betting or 4-betting with a much wider range, and then folding a greater percentage of that. I think that makes good sense. And back to Good to Be the King's final comment with that 7% idea. He's saying that he's 4-bet or 5-bet shoving when he sees that 7% range in his statistics. And I would say you're going to be looking good when you're absolutely certain that your opponent is set on a 7% range, right? As defined, let's say in general, as the poker stove default would be here: 8s or better, ace-10 suited, king-10 suited, or ace-queen offsuit or better. Again, same hand, and you're already at 52.4% versus that entire range. Now, that same 7% again probably could look like this, I would say. And then, yeah, you're just behind him. But again, it's a coin toss. There's a bit of dead money in there. You'll be plus minus nothing in the long run when you're shoving that. But again, they're going to be folding a lot of that, and that's where our entire discussion on fold equity came to be. That's super important. Again, this is Dylan. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely hope it was useful for your games. Till then, on behalf of the entire team here, all the best, and best of luck at the tables.